Hello, everyone. How are you all doing? Come on in, sit on down. I cut the intro short there, not by accident, because I just can't wait to get this show started. That's what happened there, okay? But today, I have a off the cuff, last minute, put together special show for you guys, because I would normally do my Truth or Therapy sessions on a Sunday, but something came across my desk, shall we say, coming from the Telegram group from someone who's been a regular contributor to the Little Season research. He's been there since the beginning. He's a very passionate guy who's kind of been going full force into researching this, and he's been on Twitter in particular, kind of fighting our corner on a regular basis and hosting his own spaces there, discussing these things in details as well, which are fascinating to join and listen to. But he sent across something and shared it in my Telegram group about a word I'd never even heard of before called hagiography. Or hagiography. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, to be honest, but it's a strange one, a very strange one, because this is something you think we would know more about. So I looked into it, and if you do a cursory Google search on the phrase hagiography, the description is an overly adoring biography of an individual, which is just too much and over the top. That's like the cursory description of what a hagiography is, but it's more specifically the life stories of the saints. And when you go deeper into this and look at what historians seem to think about this in like the secular modern world, they consider them something like fiction, like a over-dramatized, over-the-top glorification of a particular saint, not based in reality, but something more akin to like a comic book superhero fiction, talking about the exploits of the saints and their martyrdom and their sacrifice. And they've always been just kind of squashed to one side and considered just nothing, it's just the ramblings of insane medieval people, coming up with random stories about people that obviously didn't actually do any of these things. And a lot of these texts as well, we're discovering, have kind of been hidden throughout history, primarily by the Catholic Church, and some of them were released and leaked here and there with varying degrees of, levels of authority of how much they should actually be released or not released, and a lot of them were used as a Protestant Reformation counter as well, to talk about the legitimacy of the Catholic Church and kind of how, we have our proof here that our saints reigned through this particular time, and it probably around the time Preterism was developed, around the same time, the 1600 period, as a counter-reformation to the Reformation of Protestantism. So it was an odd time, but when you actually look at and read these stories, they are, I would say quite literally, the missing books that we've been looking for, that people always bring to us in this Little Season realm. They always say to us, surely we would have written something about it if Jesus had already reigned for 1,000 years and the Millennial Kingdom had already been here. Why don't we have any writings? Well, you read these things, and these are the writings if there's any validity to this. So what I've had to do this, because again, you've got to be careful. So there's some caveats here, and we'll get into this soon with our guests, but I'm not skeptical because I trust the guy who's made this. He's given me no reason to doubt his veracity in his research at all. But at the same time, I get this "it's too good to be true" feeling, because some of the descriptions I read in these hagiographies are like, they've literally come from my own ramblings and minds in my videos about how it would have been during the millennial reign. It's literally a direct comparison description, and it's blowing my mind in quite a way. And because obviously AI was used in the generation of these, and we're a highly skeptical bunch here in the conspiracy world, and we don't really trust AI, but as a tool, it seems quite useful in compiling information from sources we otherwise wouldn't be able to do ourselves without putting years and years of effort into it. This thing can do it in like 30 seconds. And what it has compiled, I want to know the exact methodology of how our guests today put this together before we go into actually reading some of these accounts. So without further ado, a quick introduction there. I'm going to switch the screen, and I have two guests with me today. Guys, how you doing?
Doing well. How you doing, Paul? Well.
Yeah, so we got JT from JT Follows JC, and we have Adam, who goes by is it Ad Blue? Is that it on Twitter?
Damn Blue.
Damn Blue. That's it. Ad Blue's the stuff you put in your diesel car, isn't it, to make it run better? Yeah, that's right. So, Damn Blue, but thanks for joining me, and thanks for doing this at such short notice as well. So I can't do this alone. This is too big for me to tackle on my own, I realised. I need help. And what better to get the guy who made the actual document himself, which has been circling around, Adam, on to kind of go on and explain. Adam, how did you do this? What is this exactly? how have you compiled this 169-page document with so much information about this particular time in history? I'm going to give it to you for now, and then I'll give it to JT after you, and we'll kind of have a back and forth from there.
So I mean, I've been doing research on this. I see other truthers talk about this or that, and we're all asking certain questions. We're trying to figure out the timeline. When did the reign start? When did Satan get released? How long's he been out? Because some people think it's as soon as like 2001.
Hmm.
Some people think it's back towards 13, 15, 1700s. But our timeline's like been twisted so badly. I'm pretty sure this was just an idea that was given to me, and I ran with it.
Mm-hmm.
Because you know how like you got people that do architecture, like the big channels on YouTube, and a lot of people cover that stuff. But I was like, well, I wonder if the individual timelines of individual artifacts maybe not they might not be as covered or as their tracks or what they might not be able to hide it as well, and there might be people like Flamenco and Gunnar Heinsohn that challenged these so-called official narratives.
Hmm.
And sure enough, I mean, the first one kicked in, and I basically the way that I do it with the AI is you don't want it to really know what you're trying to get at. You just ask systematically for chunks of information, and then eventually you basically trap it into having to either give you like go into straight cog dis mode where it spits out the official narrative, which quite frequently you'll have to start all over again and then start right back over. I have been doing some techniques that the saints kind of taken a page from their book when it comes to rebuking, because if there is any truth to there being demons in AI, then we should have uh, our Father and the Son has sovereignty, correct? So I basically tried that and it worked. So anytime I start getting that cog dis, I make a very clear statement about who I am and who I serve, and then I get the response that I'm looking for. But to get back to the timeline thing, I just started one artifact after another, and sure enough, I've yet to miss on a artifact or technology timeline where it has the exact same holes, right? Where the official timeline tells you that the Dark Ages start in the 500s, right? Right after the worst year in history, according to all records, whether it's ice cores, official narratives, like that's consensus across the board. And sure enough, they say the Dark Ages starts at that time, and then but the timelines of the artifacts don't show that. All of the greatest technology comes out during that time. The manuscripts. Now you have misdating in there, but basically, if you lay out the whole timeline and you put the technology in like some sort of like progressive chronology, then you'll see that like it wasn't the Dark Ages at all. Uh, nothing I've searched so far has been amiss. Every single one has the same gap where they'll just be like 400 years, and then they just pick right back up where it's exactly the same as 400 years before, or it's better.
Hmm.
Whereas if the reign started right around 600, 500, 600, which according to all the saints accounts backs that up, there'd be a slow, steady progression over that 1,000 years. And if you look at the technology, it's very interesting. It's all based on like our agriculture, farming, beating swords into plowshares, right? And a lot of these saints accounts, the next section I'm doing is divine agriculture, because there's story after story after story from one end of the earth to the other where they're growing and they're having like divine, like supernatural, uh, you know, nobody's going without. Whereas they tell us it was people just like living in caves or just, how like they paint it as like the Dark Ages, but it's quite literally the opposite. And in terms of the timeline, where I'm at right now, and mind you, it's fluid as I get more information.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm fairly convinced that the events of Revelation, or at least most of them, leading up to Christ's return, happened in the first 4 to 5 centuries, where they stretched out those events to make it look like, so basically to hide that they happened in rapid succession, exactly the way Scripture says they're going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So they stretched out over time to hide it. And I'm pretty sure the dating, when they say the year of our Lord, from what I understand and the way that it's written in these saints accounts, is that's year zero, the start of the millennial reign. According to them, is when time they started keeping that time, not when he was born, which is pretty interesting compared to your official narratives. But after doing all those timelines, and then basically I acted like I wasn't a little seasoner with the AI, and basically I'm looking into this idea, like seeing if there's any validity to it. And I was like, does this make sense? Am I crazy? And like very rarely will I ever get any sort of like objective yes to like a conspiracy related topic. And sure enough, every single time I went through a separate timeline, it said the same thing. Yeah, it fits like a glove. It fits eerily well,
Mm-hmm.
statements like that. And from there, I just happened to come across, I'd never heard of hagiographies. I don't know how to pronounce it either. I'd never heard of those either. And because I've spent so much time bedridden for the last 2 decades, I've consumed about everything from the official narrative. And that's one of my favorite obsessions, is listening to accounts of saints and martyrs and from the past. And I'd never heard of like these specific ones. And I know why now. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's because they basically tell the story that they're trying to hide. If this is Satan's little season, then he's going to want to hide the millennial reign. He's going to want to give his secret society minions the credit. He's going to want to divide up the church. One of the Just let me know if there's anything that I forget to finish the rabbit trail or whatever. But in terms of the technology, right around the time that we would assume that Satan would be released after the 1,000 years, everything switches from agriculture, high-tech water pumps, windmills, and I'm pretty sure now ether technology, because we know the buildings have it. We
Mm-hmm.
just weren't really sure. But there's tons of accounts that talk about strange, supernatural, divinely powered technology or whatever. And yeah, then I went into the accounts of the saints, and all these different theories I came up with in the timeline research turned out to be backed by all these saints accounts. And yeah, some of them could be made up. Now that's the official narrative. They're exaggerated, or they were simple-minded folk trying to explain natural things as supernatural. But when you look at it through the lens of Scripture, right? Not that it's 2025 and the official narratives of how we got to where we are, but if you look at it, it fits perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
Christ returns after that worst year in history. Saints are glorified. They're everywhere around the earth. They're painted the exact same way. Thousands of miles apart, these saints are painted identical. They're glowing. They have a giant halo on them. Some of them are a lot of the paintings show them larger than the regular humans next to them. The large doors on those
Mm-hmm.
buildings. I was curious about that. So I was like, why would they need those doors? And it turns out that uh, according to the accounts, some saints were larger, and they didn't want to make them have to bow as a disrespectful, like they shouldn't have to bow, they're glorified saints. So they made the doors big enough to accommodate those extra large saints or extra large beings of some sort, whether there's some that describe other supernatural beings or whatever, or angels maybe. But there's also ones that talk about like large humans from various parts of the earth, like
Mm-hmm.
these the islands on the old map show various creatures and
Yeah.
giants and people without heads, their heads on their chest or whatever.
It was a different
So
landscape from some of these descriptions. It's not the same world we live in today. It was a
yeah,
mystical, magical land in a sense, like I said, with mythical monsters, dragons, creatures, hybrids, all sorts of things going on, as well as normal humans, as well as glorified superhumans around as well from some of these accounts that we read. It's insane. I mean, so thanks for summarizing that. That's great. JT, I'm going to give it to you. And so, hearing all of this, what do you feel? What's your senses and feelings on this originally? Like, what have you got?
I'm pretty new to all this stuff. So the whole hagiography thing, I've never even heard of that word. And I didn't know that we were talking about the saints' books. So what would the skeptics say of, like, if they're fake? Okay, so when do people believe they were written? Because it's one thing to say that they don't believe it's accurate, but obviously if it was about a glorified saint, of course they would say it was fake, because that does not compute with them. So it doesn't mean, like, that if the stories kind of line up what we believe could be true, it would be pretty weird, even if you could never prove who wrote it or when it was written. But if, let's just say, it was written over 200 years ago and it fits with what we're saying, I mean, it's like that makes me think that there's got to be some validity to it. Because again, because we can't explain why are the doors so big on all these cathedrals? Like, it makes no sense. Like, because to me, always have to kind of wrestle with that idea of, like, that based on everything I had researched. Obviously, there was giants before and after the flood, but obviously there was much less after the flood, and they didn't live in. I don't think they lived in the cities with men. Probably after the flood, or much after the flood, maybe like in the land of Canaan, but because they were obviously a plague against normal people, so they were purged out. They lived in the woods and stuff. So why would, after the Roman Empire falls, they start building cathedrals with 30-foot doors and 20-foot doors? And I've never had a good answer for that.
Well, most people do go to the whole, oh wait, the Nephilim built all these things. This is all pre-flood buildings. And it's kind of like, how long do you think it's been? Because we're talking thousands and thousands of years ago. If you're going to go to flood times, we're saying, no, these buildings are clearly like maybe 1,000 years old. Something like that, maybe, And
they also made a statues in Moses.
It's odd, isn't it? While they're at it, let's paint Jesus everywhere and all these things.
Yeah,
and these murals.
They did like the iconography, but I mean, was that prophetic? Yeah, it's strange. Like I said, it's just strange. It's because, I could buy that there was advanced looking things like that before the flood, but the iconography and the statues and all the engravings and stuff like that, it really makes no sense if it wasn't. I mean, the iconography and the buildings look contemporary to each other.
Well, one interesting thing is in some of these accounts when I was reading through it, during this time, the 1,000-year period, when it was coming to an end, it talks about this period of mass migration that started to happen towards the end of the Millennial Kingdom. And it's kind of like people were just dropping everything, their homes, their work, and just moving north en masse. And there's lots of, Adam can attest to this, we'll read some of them in a minute, but there's just a lot of them, a lot of stories about this mass migration event. And it said that they were using megalithic structures built by the giants as marker points to lead them further north. It's kind of like the old buildings that were built by the enemy were still being used in the Millennial Kingdom for purposes and uses, because why let something go to waste when you can put it's a perfectly decent building? It's that kind of attitude, as well as obviously building all these other buildings as well.
Is that kind of like the story of Pilgrim's Promise, like they're going progress, whatever, they're going toward heaven, or the pearly gates, whatever that story's about?
I don't know that one. I'm not sure. Is that
I started to listen to it on audio, and it was a little bit hard to get through, but it's something like that, where like there's this journey north to.
Is that C.S. Lewis? Am I thinking a different book?
I'm not sure who wrote that, honestly.
Bunyan. It's Bunyan.
There you go. Okay.
Bunyan. Yeah. It's Pilgrim's Progress.
Right, Pilgrim's Progress. Yeah. So when wasn't that about a journey toward the north?
I thought it was just a journey to the promised land or something like that. But
yeah, maybe it doesn't specifically say north, but I actually did. Somebody actually messaged me probably last week, and then there was talking about all these migrations toward the north. So similar. I wonder if there can be some correlation with Grand Tartary, obviously up in the northern part of You're up.
It seems like there's echoes even in our modern history today that are inspired by whatever was going on during this time. Because honestly, I think maybe we should just get into some of these accounts because they're unbelievable. I can all, and it's like, if this is true, if this is actually real, then this is like our smoking gun. This is literally more evidence to say we do have writings from that time. It's these hagiographies. Quite literally, it's describing exactly what people were doing during this era, and how they were even preparing for the release of Satan, and how they knew it was going to happen. It's kind of all referenced in these stories. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to share the screen with you guys so you can see what I'm looking at the same time. So give me a second.
Can I, Adam, quick question though? So
Sure.
Do you have an answer to that question I asked? So if somebody was a skeptic and say that they're forgeries or they're fakes, when do they say that they were written? Like what would be acceptable timeline where it would be the earliest or the latest time that these things could have been written?
So I have accounts going all the way back to like six, seven, 800, some even earlier, but I've tried to stick within that uh, 500 to 1500 range.
So I mean, they're at the very least, they're over 500 years old, which
Yeah,
would, for us, for our perspective, we would say that would be within the millennial reign, just based on our own kind of view on the timeline.
yeah, and I'm on the same page as you guys, where I was like, this is just too good to be true, right? But I have been through, like, the ones that I've put on the ones that I've collected and published publicly are like just a fraction of what I have so far. And I mean, I've barely even scratched the surface of this. But the thing is, it's not just like they're not coming from like one location or one type of source. I mean, they're coming from uh, like low ranking people, high ranking people, people in Africa, people in China, people like they come from quite literally all over the place. And they all basically say the same thing. Especially when it comes to like the city in the north, the glowing city, people coming across it, uh, and like it's featured on old maps and different names, like High Basil or something like that is one of the names for it. And what was the other one? I don't remember what the other one is off the top of my head. But there's just too many of them. And then I came across by chance because I made a mistake and I realized the AI was pulling outside of my data set that I wanted it to. And I realized when I was looking through its thoughts, I saw this Vatican like restricted library thing. And I was like, what's that? So I did some research into that. And I found it very intriguing that uh, the types of documents that they have listed as like the highest classification, where you have to have special permission to go see them, have to relate to glorified saints, the 1,000-year reign of Christ, Satan's release, or anything prophetic. Because, like I said, the accounts come from that whole span. So in the beginning, it's all like sunshines and rainbows, saints like battling evil forces and doing all kinds of miracles. But as you start getting closer towards the end of it, that's when you start getting people saying, "Hey, you need to get in line. Like Satan's getting out." I don't know if things started to change very rapidly, but there's also two separate types of accounts. There's saints traveling to locations, like glorified saints leaving basically at the end of the 1,000 years. And then there's tons of like a king will just take his entire court and a large portion of his country and just head towards the Holy Land, which, that's pretty strange.
Well,
And
I think the thing that to me just like whether you could ever I mean it sounds like you could probably never prove who wrote it, but I think that if it has anything to do with saints and buildings, that they have anything to do with the architecture, I think that's really interesting because be like, oh well, the saints built that, and we're like, no, Bob's building that, and he's right over there. What are you talking? Like, you know what I mean? Like if somebody's attributing glorified saints or angels to building anything during the time they're living, that seems really weird because, it'd be like saying, oh, by the way, the angels built, I don't know, just pick a building that's being built in your town right then. It makes no sense. right? It wouldn't be very good. It wouldn't even be very good fiction if you could kind of prove who did all the stuff that's there.
That's
One
true.
point I'll make real quick before we move on to the reading the accounts.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody can Google this. There are all kinds of just basic articles, bloggers and stuff. But this is very interesting. So there are saints recognized by the Catholic Church, and you know how they document miracles and they verify them somehow or whatever. I don't really agree with all that, but they have saints that like have where they were recorded levitating when they were praying, right? Off the ground, multiple feet. You get accounts of like there's so many accounts of levitating and flying saints. That's one of the things that really blew my mind. And that's like an accepted thing. That's not even something that's really buried by the church, which is just kind of strange, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think.
Just before we begin this talk, someone called, well, we're going by a moniker of Anonymous Narwhal, was editing this document live as I speak. Is this open source? Can people just edit everything we're watching right now instantly? Is that a thing? They were changing Satan to add with brackets or air quotes around it, and they were literally editing this document live just then as we were speaking.
No, that was just happening.
Yeah.
I was wondering who was. I thought it was you doing that.
No,
Paul.
that wasn't me. No. So, Adam, am I about to get an edited version that someone's trying to do damage control on live right now on this show? Is that what I'm about to do here?
They shouldn't be able to. Let me just check that real quick.
Get behind me, the Satan.
Yeah, because that was odd. It seemed like they had highlighted the word Satan and wanted to put it in air quotes to all Satan, wherever Satan's mentioned. It seemed like what they were doing there, or something. I don't know. It's really odd. It's just really strange.
If I accidentally hang up, I apologize. I will.
No, it's okay.
Let me just double check the permissions on that. All right. Which one do you have? You have
the Stories of
first
Saints revised with sources. Hagiography, Stories of Saints revised with sources. Maybe you've made a new one since then that I don't know about. Maybe. I don't know. But this is the last one you sent me. In the meantime, I'm going to scroll down while you're doing that. And we can see here, it starts... So it says here you've opened it with released excerpts from restricted Vatican documents, original excerpts in plain text format. How is this different from the table of contents here, The Year Without the Sun? Is this the same thing? Am I starting here with category 1 right now? Or do I have to scroll down to get to category 1? How does this work?
Oh, yeah. So the first section is just those... the ones that are basically they're pulled out, they're in restricted documents, so we don't have access. But because they've been reviewed to be like released or changed, people have gone into research that had permission and they reference them in their writings or whatever. So that's where, and when I found those, I found that they're pretty interesting. So I put those, but category 1 is just below the restricted document.
Well, some of these might be quite interesting to quickly go through. So,
that's why that first one was really interesting.
Yeah, so this is from the Codex Lucis, Testimonium Sanctorum Transfiguratorum. Okay, so a lot of these obviously have been translated from Latin into English, haven't they, by whoever was researching them at the time. So, quote, following the darkness that covered the sun for 17 months from 536 to 537 AD, 7 brothers at the monastery of Monte Cassino underwent transformation while at prayer. Their bodies, though remaining tangible, emitted light comparable to bright lamps, requiring no candles for night offices. Most remarkably, they declared with one voice that this manifestation signified the beginning of the 1,000 years when Satan is bound, as foretold by the Apostle John. So, I mean, that right there. I mean, look here, it says here, Anonymous Narwhal. Someone's literally here with us. Are they reading along? Is that what's going on? I hope that's all they're doing. But somebody's doing something here. But that account alone is quite literally everything we're talking about. Something randomly happened. Oh, my access is expired. Let's reload that. There we go.
So I just changed it so that nobody should be able to do anything.
There we go. Well, maybe you need to do some damage control and go back through this at the end and see if anything's missing. But that first account right there, is literally people who follow Christ just being transformed in an instant into light beings and literally saying, this is the beginning of the 1,000 years of Satan being bound. I mean, that's everything we've said, just summarized in one paragraph. And this is pretty much the trend of every single thing we're about to read. It's just another account after account after account describing everything exactly as we've said. So this is another one. I'm not going to say the title of every single thing we come across because I don't speak Latin and it's going to be a chore, but I've highlighted the title of this one, and this says, "The map shows lands now covered by western seas that shall briefly emerge again when the millennium reaches completion. Most notably, the distance between Hibernia, Ireland, and the western continent, America, is shown as merely 7 days sailing when these ancient roads reappear. The northern passage marked in red indicates the primary route by which the faithful shall journey to the sanctuary when the enemy is loosed." So this is saying at the end of a millennial reign, a path will be made clearly to a sanctuary in the north for everyone to go to if they so choose, unless they want to stay for Satan's reign, basically. I mean, that's pretty on the nose, isn't it? Let's go to the next one. "In the year 580, according to the Roman calculation, numerous luminous beings were observed proceeding northward from Germania, leaving traces of light where they walked. These were neither angels nor ordinary men, but saints who had undergone the first resurrection, their bodies transformed yet still visible. They established councils in the northern mountains, where they mapped the patterns of the stars and calculated precisely when the 1,000 years would reach completion."
Oh, that's crazy, because that's that timeline too, because that's obviously still very close to the 536 timeline, which I think fits biblically because, when the sun goes dark, that's like the sixth seal.
Absolutely. And I don't think it is actually, technically, it's year zero.
Right, yeah, correct. That, I guess the dates, but I'm just saying it's interesting that even that chronology is really close to the other one about illuminated people.
Yeah, well, except traditionally speaking, the Dark Ages are 500s to 1,500. And everything's fitting in these stories in that period of time, which is 1,000 years. It's like a glove. Go ahead.
They put it. I mean, the fact that they could, if they would have switched it a little bit, but they basically said 500 to 1,500 is the Dark Ages, which is the exact 1,000 years that was the Golden Age. But then they say the Renaissance was the Enlightenment, and that's when we all became civilized. But it's the complete opposite, because all technology switched to war technology, defense technology. So.
Everything, starting putting cannons on those star forts. Absolutely. So it says here, "The northern Jerusalem stands at the point where the celestial light, aurora, touches the earth. Its walls, constructed of crystal that captures and amplifies light, extend 33 cubits in height. 12 gates permit entry, which are lined with stellar configurations marking the hours when transport between worlds is possible. Within dwells a community of the transformed faithful, governing terrestrial affairs from the millennium of Satan's bondage." I mean, that's it. Summarizing what? The Liber Jerusalem Septionalis, Kircher Mundus Subterraneus, 1665, when he pulled out one of these documents from the Vatican and was allowed to go in there and read one of them, he came out with this little gem for his own book. You know what I mean? This is nuts. And these are these... We had our suspicions the Vatican was hiding something, didn't we?
Well, it's interesting that, like I said, like kind of what I was saying before, that let's just say this is 100% true. The world would never believe this. So it's, so at no point could we ever show this to anybody as proof anyways. But it is really, really interesting that the things we have talked about and the things that are here that are written at the very least 500 years before us, or 300 years before us. That's interesting when we've never been told anything about any of this kind of stuff.
No. Like I said, it's too fantastical for people to believe. And anybody who does know about the hagiographies, I looked online and they're all just like, oh, they're just over-exaggerated fictions created about godly people. And it's kind of, they weren't
pretty good, even if it was fiction. That's what I'm saying. It's pretty good if even if it was fiction. It's kind of like, I was talking with the guy today and we were talking about the potential to make an awesome antediluvian movie. There's so much gray in that space where you could just there's all kinds of room to theorize what it could have been like. I feel like that's what this could be. Even if it wasn't true, it does line up so much with the things that make it just makes sense that it could be true.
Oh, absolutely. It says here, the calculations preserved from the 7th century unanimously assert that Satan's binding commenced with the obscuration of the sun, 536 AD, and would conclude precisely 1,000 years thereafter. The celestial signs marking this release include a triple conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter, followed by extraordinary meteoric displays concentrated in the northern hemisphere. So that's interesting.
That's really interesting. It's really interesting because I never really thought about it like that, but I think it might be Isaiah 17, and Isaiah's prophesying that I think that the sun and the moon are going to be held, like they're going to be made, what is it, like the held to derision? They're going to be made to be shame. And it was like, I remember when I first read that, I was like, it's really weird that like the sun and the moon are being described as like not just celestial objects. They were talked about like they were beings and who are evil. So it does kind of make sense that if like the devil is kind of the god of this physical world, that maybe the sun is kind of the representation of him. And so if the sun goes dark, that's the sign that, like it's all happening.
This just off the cuff here, but have you ever seen Symbols of an Alien Sky? It's by the Thunderbolts Project. It's quite popular in early conspiracy research. They're not Christians. The guys who made this are not Christians. But I watched this years ago, and my logo is actually based off of one of their images. It inspired me. And they talk about a golden age past. There was a time in the ancient past, which are rock carvings and artwork are trying to represent, basically. And it had electroplasma phenomena in the sky. They were seeing some crazy light shows in the sky at some ancient point in the past, and they didn't know what to do, so they just kind of made images on rock to describe these auroras they were seeing, these odd shapes. But the guy who made this says basically Saturn was far closer to the Earth during this time, and it was bigger than the sun. In fact, it was the main light source of the Earth in this ancient time. And so was Venus and Mars. They were very much closer to Earth. And there was a conjunction where they all came together, all three of them, Saturn, Venus, and Mars, all together into one. And my logo is basically an example of what that would have looked like in the sky. Now, I'm not saying there's any validity to that whatsoever, or that planets exist as we understand them. I think planets, in fact, are angels or wandering stars, But it's possible they dominated an ancient sky at some point. And this is kind of this idea that there was a triple conjunction of Saturn, echoing back to the idea that prior to Christ's millennial reign, Saturn may have been much closer as the physical embodiment of Satan in some way, ruling over the earth in some very odd way. I don't know.
Yeah, there was that, wasn't it? Yeah, that in the mythologies that Saturn was the first sun.
Yeah, that's what they believe.
I found this verse. I found the verse that I was talking about. So this is actually Isaiah 24, 21 through 23, and it says, "And it shall come to pass in that day, the Lord shall punish the hosts of the high ones that are on high, and the kings of the earth upon the earth. And they shall be gathered together, and the prisoners gathered in a pit, and they shall be shut in the prison, and after many days they will be visited. And then the moon shall be confounded, and the sun ashamed, when the Lord of hosts shall reign in Mount Zion in Jerusalem before the ancients gloriously." So it is interesting that that it would say that Satan was bound when the sun went dark.
So they're not needed anymore because obviously Jesus Christ is the light of the world now. He literally illuminates everything, and it does. Let's keep reading this one. So during the 6th century, after the darkening of the sun, mariners routinely encountered creatures of extraordinary size in the northern waters, particularly snails with shells large enough to shelter several men, and luminous serpents that prophesied in human tongues. Most remarkable were the men of giant stature dwelling on islands west of Thule, who claimed their ancestors had walked directly from the eastern continent before the waters covered the ancient roads. So this is, again, this idea that it was a mystical, magical fairy land as well. It wasn't like what we consider today. There were serpent sea monsters everywhere and giants still in the land at this time, and it was a completely different landscape. And this harkens back in my memory to the Cyclical, the dog-headed men. They're quite a common thing, aren't they? What was it, Is it Saint Christopher? Is that his name?
Yeah, Saint Christopher. Yeah, it had a dog head.
So maybe things were odd then. Maybe remnants of the Nephilim corruption, or the people who mixed themselves with different animals before the flood were still knocking about in some small capacity. But even they were converted. Even they were changed, and even they made the pilgrimage north when the time came, which is quite an odd thing. I can only think that the reference to serpents that prophesize in human tongues were the seraphim angels, because they are quite literally serpentine angels. That's their description. I can only think that's perhaps what it was. In China, sea dragons were very common. They're in a lot of stories. Dragons that control the waters. So it seems like Christ took control of everything, including the sea dragons of the age. It was
what's weird about that? What's funny about that too is that the most remarkable were the men of giant stature dwelling on the islands west of Thule, who claimed their ancestors had walked directly with the eastern continent before the waters covered the ancient roads.
Mm-hmm.
So in the Lord of the Rings mythology, the Tolkien mythologies, there was Numenor. And so Numenor was this island that was basically like they were the good people who fought alongside, I guess, the gods, like against the evil. And they were turned into giants and given long life.
Ah, interesting. So yeah,
it's pretty weird.
He must have known a thing or two.
And I think that like in the in that mythology too, that like whatever their version of heaven was over the Western Sea. You had to go west to get there.
Interesting. There's another one here I thought was quite good about transformation again. It says, during the night of Epiphany in 673 AD, 12 brothers from the monastery of Lucille were bodily transported by what witnesses described as a chariot of light resembling the aurora. Their journey, according to accounts they later sent, took them to a city in the furthest north where the transformed saints maintained council governing the millennial peace. This direct bodily transport occurred with increasing frequency as the millennium progressed. So this is the idea that as the millennium progressed, more and more people were reaching a state of perfection. They were reaching a state of saintlyhood, probably through the devotion, the sacrifices, the martyrdom, and a point came in those 1,000 years where they had reached a point where they were worthy to come into the kingdom, and something came and picked them up. It's like the party bus turned up, says, come join us in the kingdom, guys, get on board, we're going, you've made it. It seems very odd, but that seems to be what we're reading about here. And maybe that's what a millennial kingdom was for, because you had the resurrected saints, the first resurrection, the ones that already died for Jesus, and were beheaded for his namesake during the horrible tribulation time and the Armageddon event. But then what about those who were left? I guess they had time to come to terms with what happened and to accept Christ and to make the choice to make that pilgrimage north by foot. Or, if they were pious enough, it seems like they were literally transformed into a saint before death in this story.
Yeah.
So, which is, I don't know what to make of that, but that's what this story is saying here.
Well, what's also interesting is we were talking about on a recent stream is that if you look at church history, that like at the very early antiquity, people were pre-millennial. Basically, the church had a pre-millennial view. But then during the times of like Augustine and Hippo would have been right around the 500s, the 6th century, everyone moved to an amil position.
Mm-hmm.
So like literally the church position was they were living during the millennial reign.
Mm-hmm.
So then you have writings like this that back it up, that it was more than just a metaphorical millennial reign. It was like a literal one.
Mm-hmm. Well, the only stories we've officially been given of saints who lived during this time, they're like, they died a horrible death for the name of Jesus Christ.
They were martyred.
That's all we really hear about them all. They were really good people who did really good things for people. You know what I mean? It's kind of basic. Any human
like
can
St.
do.
Patrick.
Yeah,
St. Patrick's Day tomorrow.
Well, you got the serpents out of Ireland, as they say. But it's kind of this idea that like they were just people who did really good things, and they're the stories we've been given. And yes, I think the saints did do that, and they were doing great things all over the place. But the stories we've been given that we're allowed to discuss are like, well, any person could have done that. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
They wouldn't have to have been glorified, light-bodied, resurrected, perfected humans with superpowers, who could fly. Anyone could have done what those saints did that we've been given. But these stories we're about to read, these are superheroes. They're invincible, don't sleep, don't eat, they can fly, they glow. They are just way beyond humanity in every respect and angle, and it's kind of, these are the stories I guess we always wanted. These are the ones that back everything up and no longer make medieval Christendom seem mundane. It's kind of, these the saints were legit and they were seriously powerful. Like, there's no joke.
It makes sense, but you know, it makes sense again. The whole world did become Christian. Why? How? You know, what if it had something to do with this? That like, all right, I believe now.
Yeah, well, yeah. That's what a lot of these accounts seem to be. It's like a mass conversion of the whole earth because of what they're witnessing. They're seeing.
Wait a minute, was that guy just glowing?
So go on, Adam. Do you want to say something? Looks like you've got something to say there.
Yeah, just to like the naysayers, the point I want to like stress is these are not one-off accounts, right? They're like this is just, you know, a couple weeks of research, like another few months, and I'll probably have 400 or 500 pages of these things, and they all say the exact same thing, and they're from all different parts of the earth. I've found accounts that reference towns that are on the old Tartarian type maps in America, where you have Nuremberg, Chilaga. I'm trying to think. There's a few other towns or whatever, because I basically pulled all the towns off those maps and I cross-referenced them in the accounts. And sure enough, people were traveling earthwide, which helps explain the buildings and everything else in the United States.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Chilaga's Chicago of today, isn't it? On the old maps.
Correct.
Yeah. And Nuremberg, where is Nuremberg? I hear that one a lot.
Nuremberg is often depicted as being somewhere in the northern part of the United States. Some maps actually really interesting. It looks like it's depicted where Washington, D.C. is.
Interesting.
Yeah, it shows it going from like Virginia to New England, but the main maps that I've found show like there's a Nuremberg castle like an hour and a half from me in Maine. And the guy was you know, one of those people that did brick work, and he so-called, you know, founded the double line telegraph, laid 6,000 miles of cable from North America in less than a year, from
So
the tip
silly.
of all the way to the tip of the South America. 6,000 miles in less than
Wait a minute,
year.
wait. So that's a different one. So you're talking about, me and Brian were clowning on the transatlantic cable that was supposedly laid in like the 1850s. You're talking about one that was laid from Maine to South America?
Yeah, well, like from like Mexico basically to South America, 6,000 miles is the what.
And when was
Wikipedia
that
says.
done?
In like the 1800s.
They were so productive back then, weren't they? We could learn a thing or two from those guys.
They were resilient.
Yeah.
They were very, very. It's so insane. That is. I need to do a. We need to talk about that because we were just literally just clowning on the idea that it was. I think it was supposed to be 1,500 miles to go across from Europe to North America, but 6,000 miles.
Yep.
Oh my gosh.
Oh,
in like a year, or just under a year.
It's always in just under a year. It's always in no time at all. So another one here. According to the ancient maps that were shown in the Roman repositories, the Western Ocean was not always as extensive as it now appears. The lands called Antillia and Brazil were once connected to our continent by plains now submerged, which the ancients crossed on foot. These passages are prophesied to emerge again when celestial configurations match those shown in the upper corner of the chart. So this is looking at Columbus's journal. Interesting.
Is it so the Western Ocean would that be the Atlantic? Because obviously,
yeah. So I think from Brazil to Europe, there was a landmass that connected the two, which was used as a bridge, basically on foot originally.
Atlantis.
Well, yeah, something like that. Yeah, or like I said, it was just one big connection. There was no island. Do you know what I mean? It was just one.
They're saying you didn't even have to take a boat to Brazil.
No. Ancients crossed on foot. It says here.
I forget what the name the map is. The old map, it shows like the Rupus Negra, the black rock, and it's got those
Mercator map.
Is that the one where it's got the like four square chunks?
Yeah,
and it's got the cross river.
I think it's just showing me terrariums right now when I try and put in the actual thing. But the map he's referencing is in there. It's the Atlas Mutationis Terrarium.
Yeah, but I think he's talking about the Mercator map shows the
four
North Pole with the four rivers and 4 islands and the Rupus Negra.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
one, the Black
And
Rock.
and there's a note on one of the old maps, like, because they've digitized a lot of the old maps from this collection from somebody who died, like 60,000 of them, and they're just in the process of putting them on. And there's notes on these things that talk about this glowing city, and that's where the glorified or the holy or the pure ones live.
I think this
So
next passage, this is Descriptio Civitatis Sanctorum and Hyperborea. This is by Mercator D correspondence in 1577. Quotes, the city at the North Pole, as described in the ancient Inventio Fortunatae, stands upon the black rock, Rupus Nigra, which draws all compasses to itself. According to ecclesiastical records, it was permitted to view in Rome. This city was established during the millennial reign that began after the sun darkened in 536. Its structures incorporate technologies beyond current understanding, including perpetual illumination and atmospheric modification. End quote.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean now, Paul. Like, this is like...
It sounds like I said that in one of my random ramblings, right?
That sounds like stuff we've all said. Like, that's really, really on the nose.
It sounds like me speaking in one of my videos, which is why, Adam, I was a little bit skeptical, because we're talking about AI here, and AI has been known to hallucinate, as I've been told. I like that phraseology. And with it pulling from multiple sources, could it, and this is for our skeptics, could it just be using my transcripts from my videos, because I talk about these topics, and formulating its own fictions? Is that possible, Adam? I don't know how it works.
it is possible, but that's why I didn't even know about these restricted ones until just like 2 days ago, but I found them so compelling that I was like, I'm going to include them anyways. But there are ones where I made that whole public access list, so anybody can go see wherever these quotes are online themselves if they want to double check or
yeah,
whatever.
the link's in the description of the list of the actual sources for these stories as well. Actually, you've compiled a huge list of the actual sources you can go to yourself, the archives, and get the source text, right? That is on that list. Is that what you said? Yeah. So it's quite a big. It's quite a big list.
Yeah.
But you and I have never said that this became visible during the year that we were claiming like the Book of Revelation just happened. Like, that's really strange that date is not for, like, that's never anything I've said.
No,
like that it does fit, like, again, like this is like a glove over a hand.
It is. It's too perfect. I mean, this one from the Acta Sanctorum Glorificatorum von Eckhart Corpus Historicum Vedi 1723, whatever. I can't speak Italian or Latin. So it says here, after the Great Darkness, 536 to 540, accounts from throughout Christendom report saints manifesting glorified bodies while still living among mortals. These transformed ones exhibited qualities described by Paul: incorruptibility, luminosity, and extraordinary powers. They organized a parallel governance during the 1,000 years of Satan's binding, preparing sanctuaries that would receive the faithful when the millennium concluded and the dragon was briefly released. I mean, it sounds like something I was thinking about and saying again. It's kind of, but it's interesting that the whole point of the 1,000 years was to prepare for the release of Satan. That's quite interesting. It's like, we're building a place for you. And when
that's not, see, that view right there, again, if that's from a book that is from 1723, like, what we're told is that when the church moved over to the amill position, they believe what amill was an indefinite amount of time. And so they weren't really looking at it like a literal 1,000 years, because it was all like allegory or symbolism, so that the way this is written like somebody who believes in the short season.
It is.
Wrote this backwards, because it does fit. Like I said, I guess we don't want to not believe it, because it does make sense. But yeah, that sounds exactly like the stuff we're talking about.
Yeah, so this is why I'm grain of salt with all of this. It's interesting. I think I'm calling anybody who's looking at this document now. This is a team effort. I'm sure Adam doesn't mind, because we're all working on this together. We're doing this as brothers and sisters in Christ, in love to search for the truth. people try and look for the sources that we have here on the screen or are in this document. Let's do it together. Let's make this a solid document. Let's drop what's fiction and what's real and keep what's real and see what we can actually come up with. So far, I mean, I have no reason to doubt that any of these aren't actual books and documents from real dates and sources. But at the same time, I would say that because I'm biased, because I want this, I want to be vindicated, so, but I'm aware of that bias. So.
That's the thing, though, that I mean, to me, based on the limited use I've used with like ChatGPT and things like that, the thing that makes me really interested is like that, okay, so you're not just asking AI questions and it's spitting out this stuff. There's a source. So, right, yeah. So if anybody in the chat wants to help us verify this stuff, because obviously this is stuff we can double and triple check, look up those books and then see what you can find out. Obviously, that's the thing, that we could not do this research without AI because I don't speak Latin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So if these books are written in Latin or they're written in some different language, then how could we interpret it? But I'm sure you probably could get a summary if you did look these books up and using other sources. It's definitely worth looking into. Like I said, because the thing is, like, you think AI is making up a source? If the source is real, like I said, obviously we can check behind it.
Mm-hmm. Well, this one's from Kurt. So go ahead, Adam. You see what you need to say.
I was just going to say, like, the most compelling one that you can look up very easily is Flying Saints. You can even Google that, and it'll give you just like all kinds of different articles and resources and stuff, because that's a very huge thing. It seems like all the saints were levitating, like when they'd start praying or whatever. So, but like I said, I find it very difficult to believe that people on opposite sides of the earth and everywhere in between were writing the exact same stories and saying the exact same things about the North, about saints and all these different things, Satan being released. And in terms of Satan being released in the little season, it seems like everybody knew Satan was coming out. Now,
Mm-hmm.
the mainstream will say they were just hysterical. They were just hysterical and, superstitious or whatever. But no, they were following scripture.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they knew he was coming.
Well, this one here mentions buildings. So now we're getting into the where do the buildings come from type of territory. So this is from the Registrum Energy Perpetuae. So this is about perpetual energy. Okay, and where it comes from, this is from Kircher's notebooks of the Pontifical Gregorian University. So someone go find out if this is true. I don't have time to do it here right now, but this is supposedly the claim that's written in this notebook. The devices employed in the Northern Sanctuary utilize principles lost since antediluvian times. Primary among these is the perpetual lamp, which draws energy from the Earth's magnetic currents through lodestone arranged in precise geometric patterns. According to the transformed ones who revealed these technologies, such devices powered their cities through the millennial reign, requiring no fuel or maintenance. So extremely geometrically patterned formed buildings, like a cathedral, let's say, which is nothing but pure geometry made manifest, were used as perpetual energy manifesting devices which pulled energy from the ether. And it's an old technology which had been used since time immemorial, even before the flood. So that's everything we've been saying, isn't it? That's everything we've been saying, basically. And
are you still in the beginning section, or have you moved down to
these are just the beginning open. This is the opening before we get even to the contents of it. These are the revealed.
These are just because, I mean, people can search these, but just these are the ones, as far as I know, that are like snippets pulled from other people that have done the research. You can't actually. These are the ones that you have to have clearance to go down. They're classified.
Mm-hmm.
The actual documents. So
this is the people who have gone in to see the documents have come out and written this about what they saw, basically.
Yeah. So they were writing a book on something, and then a lot of documents will be reviewed, right? But if you go look at the date that they were all classified, it's all in the 1500s, coincidentally, that they classified all these 1,000-year reign, millennial, or Satan's little, like, being released and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's very interesting, the date that they decided to classify all that.
Yeah, you know what's interesting about this too? So, okay, let's say right now it's all made up. It's all just AI, just imagining things. What do they call it? Apparitions or something. Who did this? Because I mean, this is really weird. Because I think that, to me, what we've been talking about recently, I think when I had Jason Jack on last week, we were talking about, isn't it interesting that like the short season eschatological view, eschatological view is like the newest one, right? Does anyone doubt that? I mean, everyone's saying like there's this new thing going around.
Mm-hmm.
So did somebody in the past year, when we've been talking about this, like Matt, did they try to go reprogram AIs and put out a bunch of false rabbit trails, a bunch of breadcrumbs to places that go nowhere? It's really odd that this does make so much sense and it's so much on the nose that there's so much different varying accounts. It's not one account. This is a bunch of them. And they all make sense what we're talking about. Like to me, so if it was fake, it would take somebody, a nefarious actor behind us, to go just tell us what we want to hear. And they would have to really know what we want to hear because they'd have to know all the stuff that we talk about, which obviously the people try to debunk us, they don't even know. Either way, this is really, really interesting. It's really weird if it's not true, and it's really, really weird if it is.
It's
Yes, they
weird.
all believe this is the oldest eschatology. That this is what they believed. Like all of them in the early days, this is what they believed. They were, premillennialists, understandably so, because they were the ones being told it was coming soon, right? So that's what I would say. This is biblical eschatology, just in the same way as biblical cosmology. That's how I look at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, like I said, somebody at some point was a futurist and was correct to be one in in the past.
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
kind of
sure.
And there have been, like I said, people who
they're called the apostles.
Well, exactly. But now, obviously, if we are done with that and that time has passed, then the eschatology changes with each era, with different peoples. And this would be ours now. This is what we have to deal with. This is our story, and what's coming next for us is the end of the little season and the Gog-Magog war, and that's what we should be preparing for as people who obviously follow Christ and have made our choice to choose him over Satan in this time. This stuff I'm reading here is just
that's the thing. That's what I was saying. So it's kind of interesting, even just based on the current chronology we have. So they basically saying like, so the 1st century to like the 4th century, you have people believing in the whole they're premillennialist.
Mm-hmm.
And then from 500, from the 6th century onward, everyone was basically a amillennialist.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until like the 1800s that preterism and premillennialism was reintroduced,
mm-hmm.
which would have been right around the time that the little season would have started.
Mm-hmm. That's it.
I think the timing is really interesting. Yeah. So the people who are teaching amillennialist doctrine into the 1800s, they were wrong, but they were not wrong. They were only wrong because they didn't realize what had shifted at that time.
They also had amnesia like the rest of us. The history had been hidden by that point, and everything had been changed, and they, didn't know how to make sense of everything going on around them. So they probably said, well, Jesus Christ is ruling for eternity in a ethereal sense forever and ever. We're always in the millennial reign or something, because they didn't know how to explain what's around them, and everything had been buried and hidden, and all these books had clearly just disappeared into the Vatican vaults by this point. So it was kind of the information was scarce, and we have a lot of ideas of mass migrations, forced migrations of people, genocides, all sorts of things. We're going to civil wars, just the complete destruction of old empires, and a power vacuum was clearly created at the end of the millennial reign. Because what we're reading here is everybody at the end of the millennial reign who knew Christ was there and knew about the saints got up and left, and they went north. And
maybe that's why they needed orphan trains,
because the kids were left behind.
Because there was no they said, see you kids. No, but I mean there was not enough people, so obviously they were. I don't know. The interesting part about that is that what you were saying about like the amillennialists and even like the people who argue against us, they'll say, well, who said that the millennial reign was going to end? It's like, well, the millennial reign has to end, but we're not saying the kingdom ended.
No.
The only thing that we're saying is that's why the amil position doesn't really make a lot of sense, is because it clearly shows a period where the devil is locked up and then let back out. So It says 1,000 years, so I believe it's 1,000 years.
Yeah.
So
We call it
other
we call
than
it
that,
a
but
millennial
we
reign.
also believe that Christ is king, right?
Yeah, well, we call it a millennial reign, but what we are talking about is a time in human history where the devil's locked up for 1,000 years.
Yes.
And that gives us the ability to be unhindered by the adversary, with Christ at the helm and his saints ruling over us, righteousness for 1,000 years. So we call it the millennial reign of Christ because we don't want to talk about Satan or give him the credit. It's just that he's gone for 1,000 years, thank God, that type of situation. But it says he gets released after those 1,000 years, and you can only assume with the adversary around whispering in everyone's ear again, everything would just collapse into chaos for whoever stayed behind. Because not everybody clearly made that pilgrimage before the gates shut in the north. A lot of them may have said, no, I'm not leaving my home. I'm staying right here. We know there were people who were living during this time who did live in rebellion. We know there were people.
You know what? Maybe those Left Behind movies were really about the fact that everyone just left.
Well, maybe some people said, I'd rather rule here as a king with Satan than be a servant in the city of God. Maybe some of them actually felt that way, So they
Left
stayed
Behind
behind.
was like, see you kids, we're out of here.
Maybe. Well, maybe it could have been that people, family members were becoming glorified saints and transforming before their very eyes, and they weren't because they hadn't believed or entered the kingdom in their hearts. They hadn't believed or let Jesus in or the Holy Spirit do his work. They hadn't accepted Christ's offer, so they never had that opportunity to become transfigured and make it to the kingdom, into the gates. And maybe people were left behind by family members. We don't. I mean, he came.
I'm just cracking up by just thinking about, like, if you don't clean your room, we're leaving you.
Yeah, if they're saying that, they probably wouldn't get transformed, would they?
No, probably not. Every now and then you got to throw a thread out there to make the kids pay attention.
I wanted to make 2 quick points. So if you go down to category 1, the first one is a great example of it. There's this calendar called the Seleucid, I don't know how to pronounce it, Seleucid calendar. But it says in the year 848, but then it says according to the Seleucid calendar, it's 536, 537. So I'm wondering if that calendar is actually more correct for our date, because that's showing the year without the sun, which we're assuming is 536, 537. So some of these accounts will say like 700 or 800 for these events. So it might actually be according to this calendar. So if it says 800, this apocalyptic event happened, it might actually mean according to that, whatever that calendar is. I don't know if I've ever even heard of that calendar.
Seleucid calendar. I've not heard of that one myself. Well, the first millennium we know is a mess in terms of timelines and dating. Like I said, the work of Gunnar Heinzen has already told us and explained that they have botched that massively. We have no idea how long that time period actually was. The whole 1,000 years we call the first millennium might only literally just be 300 years worth of history. That's all it is, and it was the Armageddon event, basically. From Christ to destruction of the temple, to the beginning of the millennial reign, to the tribulation event. Maybe 250 years, 300 years max, but it's not 1,000 years worth of history there. So, what we call 536 is actually 0.
Yeah, it's probably, I would say it's closer to like 100-ish, maybe.
Maybe 100, or maybe like 70 AD with the temple and not long after the temple destruction, something like that, We don't really know, but we know it's been just stretched into a non-existent time period, and like I said, realistically, if Gunnar Heinzen's right, this isn't the year 2025. This is, what is this now? The year 1325 or something like that, or 13, is it something about that? To take 700 years off.
Yeah. I'm comfortable saying like somewhere between like 13 and 15.
Something like, So like I said, 70 AD, destruction of the temple, 1,000 years, 1,070, and we've been in the little season for maybe 200 years, 250 years. That's about it, roughly. That's our rough, real timeline. But like I said, when I see 536, I am really thinking 70 AD to 100 AD. That's we would traditionally understand it. Something like that is the real time zone here. But this goes in the face of all secular history. Everything we've been taught, this is just not allowed. What we're saying here is, nope, you're crazy, shut up, you lunatics. Right? That's not the official narrative.
You're right.
And
some of these are in the heretic section of, like, when you go to the hagiographies, be like, oh, this is the heretic section. No, this is
The
for me.
heretic section.
It sounds like the true story, to
Yeah.
me.
Well, let's read this one. So in the year 848, the Seleucid calendar 536, there was a sign from the sun, the like of which had never been seen or reported before. The sun became dark, and its darkness lasted for 18 months. Each day it shone for about 4 hours only, and still this light was only a feeble shadow. Everyone declared that the sun would never recover its full light again. The fruits did not ripen. The swine tasted like sour grapes. And I imagine this as every single volcano went off. The whole sky is just now covered in ash. That's what I imagine this to be. And I think
I know we read that account, that very account. There was very rare. There was not a lot written, but that was one of the things we read.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is not contested even by modern historians. This happened. The sun went out for like 18
well, one
months.
of the, I thought it was interesting. One of the sources was named John from Ephesus. I just always thought that was really weird. It was almost sound like.
Well,
But not that. Was it that John? Is it the John, the beloved John? Like, I mean, it could have been.
It could have been. We're up to speculation on this one now, but maybe it's around if we squash the timeline down. Yeah, it may have been him talking about this. Who knows?
Well, John, if you believe what the Bible says, that he was not going to taste death until Jesus' return.
Mm-hmm.
So he could have written something before he left.
Yeah. Because
we're told the last thing he wrote was the book of Revelation. But if he was there till then, he might have said, hey.
One interesting thing about this, the whole idea that volcanoes went off, and even Gunnar Heisen was saying these cataclysmic events, he's equated to maybe the Icelandic volcano coming off because it had its effects all the way into China. And it seems like the whole world after this was plunged into like a mini ice age, because there was just no sunlight. So all the crops died, the temperatures dropped. But I've seen a video recently, and I have to give credit where credit's due. There's a small channel who's been really pushing this, who inspired me on it. But he's saying the mud flood that we've been interpreting is more likely ash that has fallen, which has deposited and come down from the sky and buried everything. That's why
that could make sense.
That's why it's so uneven. And that's why it's like some places are deeper than others, and it's kind of like it's just mounds falling from the sky of molten earth in particle form, just condensing on top of itself, and it's more likely that way. It's not a mud flood, it's just raining down the darkness after the darkness, That makes sense. That could have buried all of Rome, right?
And can a like what's depicted as a volcano be like, couldn't you imagine it being described as a mountain melting like wax?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Well, this explains the biochar, black rock, that's burnt up.
Yeah, the scorched earth. Yeah,
exactly. And it makes sense. It makes sense. I mean, we saw the damage that Pompeii created. That's the mainstream understanding of a volcano destroying a city. But what if it was literally that was just one of the cities that was buried and destroyed during this judgment event? It wasn't just darkness, but people were dying instantly because of volcanoes suddenly erupting. And biblically based, one of our members of the community made a video basically explaining it seems like volcanoes didn't even exist until the first one in Pompeii.
There's no accounts before that.
It's curious, isn't it? That sounds like a tribulation style event to me.
Well, I mean, yeah. Again, this is like we live in a world where that's not uncommon. But but again, this is the most recent time because there's more time before that that it's never written about. Like ancient peoples would not have talked about something like that happening.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's got here an extended interpretation of this, what we read. It says, following this darkness, certain holy men throughout Syria and Mesopotamia began to exhibit transfigured bodies, their flesh incorruptible and luminous, particularly in darkness. In the monasteries of Mar Simeon Stylite, 7 monks were transformed simultaneously while praying, their bodies emitting sufficient light to illuminate the sanctuary without lamps. These transformed ones declared this event marked the beginning of the 1,000 years when the ancient enemy is chained, and they prophesied that after a millennium, the enemy would be loose for a time and a half. They established communities in remote regions, particularly northward beyond the Caucasus, where they prepared sanctuaries for the faithful before the final loosings. This is a similar account to the one we read earlier, isn't it?
Yeah, it sounds like it.
So is this a separate account where the same thing happened in a different place? As soon as they transformed, they said the message. This is the beginning of the 1,000-year reign. We're going to prepare a place for you. We've got 1,000 years to prepare. Basically, did they all just say that instantly when they were transformed as like a message translated directly from Jesus to whoever was around? And this is heavy stuff. Could you imagine witnessing that? No wonder, like I said, Christianity just spread. You've seen people flying around in light bodies suddenly going north. It's like, what was that? And it's kind of a bit of follow that, see what was going on over there, and it's kind of they're building these buildings all over the place to basically spread the message and take people in and as signposts to keep going further and further north. And look, I'm just thinking out loud here, but why is it that the more further north you go in Europe, especially, the more beautiful and advanced these buildings seem to get, and more condensed these buildings seem to get, especially in Europe. You start going to like Copenhagen, up into Denmark and then Norway, and these buildings are everywhere with this particular style. And then things start to get icy and murky and colder and weirder. So who knows what the landscape was like then, but today it's like a barrier's in place. You can't really go too far because you'll die because of the conditions. But it seems like there's like further north in the hemisphere you go, the more we see these advanced architectural styles.
You know what makes me think when you just said that, Paul, is that we know, as I always send you guys all those articles about them digging up Roman stuff.
Yeah.
So what if, like what it says is like there's this place where, call it the mud flood or whatever. There's things that are buried up to 15 meters, 45 feet deep.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what if it was deeper, closer to Rome? And then the further away you got from Rome, it was not as deep.
Well, maybe. If only Gunnar Heinsohn was around, he'd probably know the answer to that.
I know, man. Like, that's the same. Well, yeah, right. Because it's like that if you see like the depictions of what they were showing like Rome to look like in those pictures, Gunnar Heinsohn had these illustrations. They were literally farming in Rome.
Mm-hmm.
Because the mud and all the sediment and all the stuff was way up there. And that was like up into like the 1500s.
Mm-hmm.
So what if the further north you went, the less it was wrecked?
I think it seems that way because there's such a condensed amount of that type of architecture the further north. And I'm in the north of England. I'm as north as it can get next to Norway, and yeah, we are surrounded. Even the smallest cities have huge Romanesque pillared architecture everywhere, completely out of place. Like it shouldn't be here. And we're given some silly story that some rich guy in the 1800s built it, within a year.
In a Renaissance style.
Exactly, yeah, something like that. And you look at this thing, it's like this thing looks 1,000 years old. Like it looks 1,000 years old. It's not new, This is not 200 years worth of weathering I'm looking at here. It's that type of stuff. But it still stands and it's still beautiful. It's incredible, and it's kind of. But again, you go further south, the Roman stuff is buried, and like I said, you're sending me articles every day. A new Roman city has just been uncovered, 13 foot beneath the ground. A new fresco, a new Roman bathhouse or something. It's just Rome was buried. It was just wiped off the map, like absolutely just decimated, like gone.
It's unreal, it's unreal. But I said it's funny, like without what they say, the brain is useless when the eyes can't see, like or the brain can't see. I can't remember what the exact say. When the mind is blind, because it's like nobody even stands to think what that means. Like they're reading about Rome in the Bible, and then literally there's news articles almost every single day. They accidentally dug up some Roman thing.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody even stops to ask, how did it get buried?
Mm-hmm. Didn't you just send me a link that a literal ship was underneath where the Twin Towers wreckage is? Was that you?
No, I didn't see that. No, was that Adam?
Someone sent me the link in the Telegram. They've literally, they're digging under the wreckage of the Twin Towers and all this type of stuff, and they found an enormous like wooden ship, like a battleship, like a pirate ship style ship. You know what I mean?
That's just a weird place for it to be.
Under the ground, like deep underground. It's kind of, how did that get under there? A ship of all things. You know what I mean? It's kind of, the landscape is not what it used to be, is what I'm saying. Like something's happened here, like a ridiculous shift. And I can imagine a cataclysmic event would suddenly just make a ship crash into the land and get swept over with like land and like ash maybe or something, to the point where we built on top of the ruins and have no idea what's under our feet. We have no idea what's underneath us,
Right. So that's the thing to me, that as a conspiracy theorist, I would say the lack of historical evidence of whatever happened to me is proof of some kind of a cover up, or they just don't want you to know it. And then the normies will just say, well, when did any of this stuff happen? It's like, I don't know, but I mean, like, what, like the physical evidence matters to me. That this stuff is buried. It makes no sense. Again, like if the Rome is mentioned as like the fourth beast in the book of Daniel, it got destroyed, like literally destroyed, like fully destroyed. Some people say, oh, the Roman Empire never fell. Yes, it did. And it fell really, really hard. If you look over all their cities being under 15 meters of sediment, it's like, yes, it fell pretty badly. And it's like, how did that happen? They don't even try to, like I said, they don't even try to explain it. Don't even try.
Well, then the narrative would fall apart, wouldn't it? Just don't acknowledge. Just don't look. Yeah. I forget that. So go ahead, Adam. Sorry.
It was the Dark Ages. Nothing much happened then, so don't even worry about it.
Yeah. So at the end of the 1,000-year reign, I've gone through tons of different accounts that talk about mountains moving out of their place, quite literally. Oceans rising. But I have also read that how the scripture says that everybody has to go bend the knee to Yeshua or Christ, and there'll be consequences if they don't. I think that at the end of the 1,000 years, some places faced a much harsher consequence for still refusing Yeshua, even when Satan was locked up. Based on the accounts, anyways.
Well, can we jump to that? What section's that in? And we'll read some of those accounts.
That would be the G. Actually, I don't even know what the section would be.
I think it's category 3, if I remember correctly. I'm on category 2 now. The glorified saints in the New Jerusalem in the north.
There should be a section about Satan being released, or something like that. I don't know which section it is. I don't have that one printed out. Let me look on my pull it up. Let's see.
But it seems like it's a lot of this, like a repeated tale being told here. Like every one of these is kind of like the same story told from a different perspective.
From all over the earth.
It's like everyone knew what was going down during that time. Like everything, knowledge, people knew. Which is why I suppose rejecting Christ in that time was just like ridiculous. It's kind of like, are you seriously not going to, like I said, bend the knee now? You're not going to realize, like, the Son of God is right here. People are transforming before your very eyes. This is it. This is the kingdom, And people still were like, no, I'm not doing it. Like, absolutely not.
That's our nature.
Exactly. Well, yeah. It's not that surprising, absolutely. But it's kind of, those people were told, look, if you don't, you'll get drought. You won't get rain. Like, there's consequences,
You know who else was told that? The Israelites.
Oh, yeah.
I was just reading through Deuteronomy again. I just finished Deuteronomy. It's like, yeah, that's what we all think when we're reading that book. We're like, how did they turn away so quickly? They literally made a golden calf right after Moses went up the mountain. How did they transgress all the commandments right away? How did they forget everything God did for them?
Straight away, yeah.
So it's like there's nothing new under the sun. Men are still the same, and they there's a cognitive dissonance is so real.
Well, even during this time.
7. Category 6 and 7.
Okay. Well, even during this time, obviously people were being killed. Martyrs were being made martyrs for Christ. They were being murdered still. and like even I think you see the stories here. People were trying to kill the glorified saints, but couldn't. They couldn't kill them by that point. But
there's a bunch of assassins trying to kill them over and over again, and failing. That's kind of funny.
Well, exactly. Obviously, you got stories of like the thumbnail for this beheaded saints just walking around carrying the head. Yeah, I mean, it's like
you know what, Brian. I remember one time Brian was talking about this on one of our Halloween streams, and I thought the thing he said, I just didn't even try to acknowledge what he was talking about. But he was saying, because I thought it sounded so ridiculous, but he was saying like jack-o'-lanterns came from the fact that there was a story about this decapitated saint that literally preached after he got his head chopped off. That was some kind of story from like Northern Europe, and I was just like, moving on. I was just like,
there's actually a lot of stories and depictions of saints holding their heads. You know, they were beheaded for Christ's sake, but then resurrected into the glorious day afterwards. I don't know if that's where jack-o'-lanterns exactly are related to or come
No,
from.
I mean that's not where my research went either. That's
No.
why I was just like, well, I heard it was because they're some kind of a came from gourds or something like that, and they're making goblin faces or something to ward off, you know, kind of like the whole thing about like gargoyles. It was like a gargoyle for your house. You make a pumpkin.
Yeah, something
or
like
a gourd or some kind
to
of
ward away evil spirits, usually something like that, you know. So anyway, I've found section 6, category 6, end of the millennium. So a lot of these it came from what 1536 to 1540, exactly 1,000 years later. So the Great Northern Lights events of 1539. So the Great Northern Lights events. Let's read this account here from 1555. So this is Uppsala University Library is where you can find this. It's a Peter Fisher translation, description of the Northern peoples. This is from 1996. It was published. In the year of our Lord, 1539, throughout all the northern lands, extraordinary light appeared in the sky continuously for 7 weeks during winter. Unlike the common aurora, which appeared occasionally, these lights formed distinct patterns resembling armies in battle array, cities with towering structures, and most remarkably, what appeared to be vessels moving through the air. These phenomena were witnessed simultaneously across Sweden, Norway, Iceland, Greenland, and even parts of Scotland and England. Many learned men interpreted this as signifying great transformations in world affairs, while certain northern hermits and monks declared it marked the conclusion of an age of relative peace, the unleashing of long restrained forces of discord. Interesting. So that wasn't even that long ago this was said. This was written. Coincides perfectly, doesn't it, with what we've been saying?
1996?
No. This is from a reference in 1996 from a book written in 1555. Okay. Yeah.
So it's translated probably in 1996.
Yeah, it's from this one, Oldus Magnus Historia de Genibus, something or other. This is from this book here.
It is sort of interesting, the timeline of like what we're taught basically mostly in school is, you know, at least in America, when the 1500s is when obviously America was settled.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of interesting timing, right?
The exact same time. Everything, a lot of stuff went down around the Enlightenment period and the, you know, and like I said, as far as we're concerned, this was the end of the millennial reign and the release of Satan. This is not the Enlightenment period. This is the, you know, Lucifer calls himself the light bringer, so no wonder they called it that, you know, but this was
there's something about like the people who do the research we do, we'd say that whole Columbus narrative just doesn't seem true. We're taught that it took place in a certain time period.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, that's the more significant part. Is like if people are saying this coincides with the end of the millennial reign, it does seem interesting that would also correlate with the discovery of the New Atlantis, according to Manly P. Hall.
Mm-hmm. Well, it isn't interesting because obviously we have all these photos of of this early time period. We call it the 1800s or something because we don't know how long we've actually been in a little season. We don't know how much of our modern history is fabricated as well. Like I said, if it's only been about 250 years since this actual event, not 500 years or 600 years as they're making it out to be, then when America did get discovered around and established itself in 1776 and all this type of thing, I mean, that kind of coincides quite well with the 250-year period we've actually been in. And you see pictures, don't you, of these early cities just empty. And people say, it's because of long exposure and all this type of stuff. And it's kind of, someone could have been sat down for long enough for them to appear as a smudge on there at least. You know what I mean? Not everyone's moving perpetually all the time. You stay still for long enough, you make an imprint on a photo like that. It does happen, you know. I'm a photographer. I know these things can happen. I've done long exposure photography and I understand how it works. But it would make sense that, well, if everyone just got up and left, because time's up, it's time to go to the city before the season begins. Everyone knows it's coming, you know. We've done everything we can. We've built the earth out, ready for whoever wants to stay. Satan's being released. It's his turn now. But it makes sense then, let's go over to America, whoever was left, who didn't go to the thing, and says, let's get all these buildings while they're good to go. Let's go take Chilaga for ourselves, you know. Let's go and get It's that type of thing. And then they go over there and, like I said, establish this new melting pot country of vagabonds and travelers and rejects from other countries and the rest of it, you know. Let's all get together as one amalgam, new Babylon, revised, new, you know, it's kind of like a new Tower of Babel situation, isn't it? A whole world coming one situation. And that's why this whole country of yours is just encoded from head to toe with Roman symbolism. Just new Rome resurrected, new
The
Babylon.
Great Seal of America,
It's
Norvis Ordo Seclorum.
Exactly.
Don't trust the dates on the maps either, because I discovered that like every single one of these maps allegedly was created in the same century in the 1500s,
Hmm.
whereas I'm pretty much convinced that they took rain maps during the 1,000 years and they basically copied them or changed the dates or whatever, because it doesn't make any sense that all of these maps came out in the same century. That just it doesn't.
The age of exploration. Of course they would. Why wouldn't they? You know, that's what they say, isn't it? Well, it says here what we've got here. We've got the manuscript predicts that exactly 1,000 years has elapsed since the enemy was bound in darkness. The heavens shall display unprecedented lights in the northern regions for 49 days. These lights shall reveal the gradual withdrawal of the sanctuary city as the transformed ones prepare for the dragon's release. Patterns in these lights will reveal armies gathering, structures ascending, and the vessels of the saints departing from the physical realm. This celestial display shall be visible from all north lands, signifying the millennium of the relative peace is concluded and the brief season of the enemy shall and has commenced. So, I mean, this is basically saying it became a spiritual kingdom by this point. It disappeared from our visual ability to perceive in some ways, kind of what it's saying here. You know, and it's kind of maybe, because we've argued, well, where is it now? Can we go there? Can we go to the city now? People have been saying, let's get on a boat and go, you know. And people who claim to travel to the north can't find anything. There's nothing here. But maybe it did recede into the heavenly realms. Maybe it did become a place that can't be seen with human eyes until time comes again. I think some accounts on here, obviously there's a lot of accounts, but if I'm right, Adam, and I remember reading a few, it seems like there's like a 7-year cycle where it starts to become visible again. And this is still going on now. And then it recedes again. And every 7 years, it does become visible for a short period of time. And doesn't that align with the solar cycles that we're given? I'm sure it does. 'Cause I remember watching a lot of like suspicious observers back in the day when I was still in the heliocentric worldview, you know, sun flares. Then you had like solar minimums and solar maximums, and it was on this wave cycle and when it's at a minimum, the energy in the atmosphere of the poles is low. You don't get many auroras, but when there's a solar maximum and the sun's just at its highest peak and it's spitting out solar flares, you get flares. You get aurora borealises because you get ionic particles being every time a wave hits us or something like that. And I'm sure the cycles are in 7-year periods. I'm sure it aligns. I could be wrong, but. Is that their excuse to explain why the northern lights are more prevalent at certain periods and not so much at other periods? It's because of the cycles of the sun, you know. Or is it the cycles of God's sun coming back into our realm briefly before disappearing again? That's just, again, thinking out loud here. I don't actually know if any of that, but there are accounts here of every 7 years. Maybe I can find it if I just do like a Command F thing.
Have you seen my videos I've made that show the radar maps and how they've blocked off that whole part of the map? Because there's something up there that's pulsing this massive pulse of energy, and they try to block it. They got most of like all of Greenland and northern Russia, all that's blocked off now, so you can't see it at all.
Mm-hmm.
But I made a compilation of these videos because over the last like 2 years, it's been growing. It's either getting closer or it's getting bigger. One or the other.
Mm-hmm. Well, we do know is it the magnetic North Pole, or it's moving. It's been moving from Canada since the 1800s towards Siberia, and it's gone over the middle point now. The geographic North Pole, as we call it, which is the stationary point. It's gone past that now, and now it's getting closer and it's been getting faster as well. It's like big leaps,
like 50 or 60 kilometers a year,
something like that. So something is very fast approaching the coast of Siberia on the northern coast, and it's not going to stay hidden for long, whatever it is.
Mothership.
Well, who knows? Who knows? That's one of my working theories, but I can't say if that's. I can neither confirm nor deny if any of that is true. But I found the 7-year thing here. So this is from Biblioteca Ambrosiana in Milan. That's the repository where you can find it. It's publicly accessible. Scholarly editions are available. The published edition is the Giovanni Tobacco edition, the Vita Beati Ramunda from Rome, 1957. And it says here, from sections omitted in standard editions, among the hermits of the Alpine regions exists an ancient tradition of the northward pilgrimage, following what they call via Hyperborea, the Hyperborean way. According to accounts I gathered during my visitations to remote hermitages, these pilgrimages follow specific mountain paths marked by distinctive stone cairns bearing symbols of the cross, combined with more ancient signs said to date from the apostolic times. Most remarkably, certain valleys and passes serve as gathering points. Oh, why is this suddenly turned up? Hang on, sorry. Gathering points were at specific intervals determined by celestial observations. Hermits throughout the Alpine regions assembled to journey northward in groups of 7 times 7. These pilgrimages occurring on cycles of 7 years with major gatherings every 49 years. Involve hermits from regions as distant as the Pyrenees and the Carpathians. According to accounts from those few who return, the pilgrims travel beyond ordinary lands to a sanctuary city built into the living mountain of the world's axis, where transformed saints maintain the governance of terrestrial affairs during the millennium of peace. So there you go. Every 7 years.
Follow the yellow brick road.
Well, yeah. It's the same story, isn't it? That's exactly what it is.
Kind of. It's interesting. At 49 years and 7 years, you think about like the Sabbath years and the Jubilees.
Well, exactly. It's all on God's timing, isn't it? It seems absolutely. Which will make sense in these stories if we're going off a biblical narrative here. Those
numbers would have been shadows of things later.
Exactly, absolutely. I mean, I think I'm still in the same section here. I think this is section 6, 9. Where are we up here? Byzantine Northern Pilgrimage Networks. So there's actually quite a lot of these pilgrimages happening, and this would explain. This would make sense that they would do that. This is what we were told would happen. I think it's in Zechariah. You would have to make a pilgrimage to the city during the millennial reign to show your allegiance, and then your city would not suffer the droughts and probably be blessed, and it's that kind of thing. And it was a requirement of the millennial kingdom. It's one of the laws. You have to go to Mount Zion and take part in the feasts or something like that, and take part in the rituals that would go on there, the biblical holidays. And if you don't, your country would not do very well. And you have vast swaths of desert on the earth today, and I have to wonder, is that why?
It's my conclusion that I think that some of those Old Testament scriptures were more metaphorical allegory, because, again, I don't think that they were doing the Old Covenant during the millennial reign. But it is interesting to think that it doesn't mean you wouldn't make a pilgrimage to go see the king.
If it became visible every 7 years, now's our chance. Let's go check it out. It makes sense, wouldn't it?
What's really sad is that Vitali's not here, because Vitali wrote that book about all the mythologies about the Garden of Eden. Mm-hmm. I should plug his book. That book is really interesting because it talks about like Hyperborea. I think isn't there a place, there's mythologies from the Irish that there was some kind of a island city that was only visible at some times that was somewhere near where they lived.
Where's that?
I want to say it was like the Irish had some kind of mythology about some city that was only visible at certain times.
Probably. I mean, I'm not Irish, so I don't know. But yeah, maybe it wouldn't surprise me. Go ahead. Sorry, Adam.
There's a bunch of like Viking accounts and like these clans that we're told were barbarians during this Dark Ages, right? Mm-hmm. Like this one, it's one of these sagas from Iceland. I'm assuming this is connected to like the Vikings. It says, in the days after the skies darkened and the seas fouled, certain seer woman told of a star-born men dwelling in the northern heavens. They bore neither wound nor want, and were said to shape the destiny of kings with counsel gleaned from a crystal city none could approach by ordinary ship.
Interesting.
And this, so that the accounts don't just come from Christians or people who witness the saints. They come from all these different types of groups of people that are all saying the exact same thing. There's something up there that's not, I guess, wouldn't fit into our pre-programmed reality.
No, well, there's another account here. This is the Irish one, luckily, just by chance. I'll wait till Joe gets his headphones back on so we can hear this one. But we found an Irish account here, Joe.
Okay, I was going to show you. I found Alpha Talks' book.
The Forgotten Paradise. It is. It's a great compilation of loads of examples from all over the earth where they're all talking about this thing in the north. Either it's described in many ways. A floating city is very common.
Well, it's called, like, I think he often talks is like it's paradise. So paradise to us would be Eden. So, but there's mythologies of paradise everywhere, all around.
Shangri-La, I think, is another one.
Lots.
Isle of the Blessed is a Greek one.
There you go.
There's another one too.
Well, this is the Irish one. Among the Irish exists an ancient tradition regarding what they call Slíg Thuad. I probably butchered that one. The Northern Way. Anyway, predating their conversion to Christianity, yet maintained alongside it. According to accounts I gathered during my journeys through Ireland, this tradition involves established routes leading northward from specific ancient sites marked by distinctive stone monuments bearing spiral patterns said to represent the pathways between the worlds. Most remarkably, certain monasteries, particularly those founded by Columba and his disciples, were deliberately established along these routes, maintaining what monks call the northern knowledge alongside Christian teachings. At intervals determined by astronomical calculations, selected individuals from throughout Ireland undertake pilgrimages northward, travelling first to island monasteries and then beyond to what they call the Ternanog, land of youth. During my lifetime, significant pilgrimage occurred in 1145, 1152, and 1159, each following unusual aurora displays visible through Ireland. Those few who return from those journeys bring accounts of reaching an island city built of crystal that captures light itself, where beings neither fully mortal nor fully angelic maintain records of all events since the world's creation and govern affairs during this age of relative peace. So again, the same story from a completely different place. They're all coming back with the same message over and over and over again. Crystal City in the north appears every now and then. Saint-like, god-like people up there ruling us and taking account of everything. Like this, it's the same story over and over and over again. That's all these are. That's what this is a compilation of, mainly.
Yeah, I think it's impossible, like, for over the course of 1,000 years, for people over the entire surface of the earth to be writing the exact same stories and there not be some validity to it. It's just, that's, in my mind, that's quite impossible. Especially, it's not like they had to, well, maybe they had some sort of communication. From what I understand, the saints had some special sort of, like, divine, where they could just connect to each other and be in the same place. There's many accounts of that in the Catholic Church, where saints are in the same cities on the opposite sides of the earth, accounted at the exact same time.
Well, you look at the frescoes of the saints, on these churches, and they all look the same. Like, the characters are the same, and it actually looks like everyone knew what Peter looked like. You know what I mean? For example, like they knew all. It doesn't matter which one it was. They have the same look to them. And it's kind of, how do these people thousands of miles apart during a time where travel wasn't as easy as all that, But while building monasteries at the same time, knew what the saints that they were painting looked like. And they all look the same no matter where you go. How is that possible? When you really think about it, that's actually, according to the official narrative, it's not. But according to these stories we read here, the saints had the ability to manifest anywhere they wanted instantaneously at any point on the earth. They could travel in the blink of an eye. They weren't bound by our earthly, you have to get from one place to another by exerting energy with your physical body type of stuff. It's more of a, if I want to travel 1,000 miles, I can travel 1,000 miles just by thinking about it. That seems to how they behaved on this earth. That would make sense if these saints were just traveling from place to place instantaneously, overlooking the creation of monasteries, let's say, which were clearly markers to lead people north to the city in some way as well. They weren't simply just there as a place to worship. They were a stopping point for pilgrims to make their way north, like a place of rest. It seems like that's what all these narratives are telling us here. That's what the whole point of them was. They had a purpose. And like I said, it makes sense, wouldn't it? If you were preparing people in 1,000 years, that, look, 1,000 years is going to end. Satan's going to get let loose. You better know the way to get to the city. Practice for the 1,000 years. Make pilgrimages every 7 years. Know the routes. Know when you're going to have to stop, when you have to take breaks. Be prepared for that journey. Because when it ends, the gate's shut, you better be there, And that kind of, I can imagine it here, but that makes sense why It was necessary to make a pilgrimage every 7 years, not to follow some old law, which is done away with, but to train yourself. It's like preparing for a marathon. You just practice this, because when the time comes, you have to make it quickly. You're going to have to get up there quick, and it's kind of, you got your stopping points along the way, but maybe you'll learn to skip a few of them or something like that. And I'm just thinking out loud here, but I'm imagining what this time would have been like, and it's incredible.
I've been wondering if at some point we're supposed to be making the pilgrimage up there, like to get away from this.
I think
whatever's going on.
I imagine these markers are destroyed. These stones that were supposed to tell you which way to go, whatever it is. I imagine they're not there anymore, and we wouldn't even know where to begin. I imagine.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's interesting. So I got out Vitali's book, The Forgotten Paradise, and so in chapter 2 it talks about the Slavic paradise of Bujan. So it was not Irish, but I don't know. I mean, Northern Europe is Northern Europe to me. Close enough. Anyways, it says, according to the Slavic mythology, Bujan is an ancient Slavic version of the perfectly earthly paradise. Bujan is described as a mythical island in the ocean with the ability to disappear from sight and then reappear. According to the ancient Slavs, Bujan was a sacred island because it was first the land that appeared among the primordial waters. Bujan, known as the magical island, a place where the seed of all living beings is stored. The ancient Slav believed the source of all weather of the earth was created by Bujan and sent forth into the world by their god Piran. Piran was known as the highest god of the Slavic pantheon, and he was known as the god of war, lightning, storms, fertility in the sky. In the center of the island is a white stone known as an alatar. The mystical white stone marks the center of the universe, and on the white stone stands the world tree. To those who are able to find it, it is said they will be granted happiness and immortality for all eternity.
It sounds like a pagan spin on what we've been talking about, basically.
Well, I mean, it's like, I think it's funny. It's like, I think in Tolkien, the main god is Iluvatar, and I think that being was called Alatar. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting. Like, so one of the promises in the Book of Revelation is that we're going to be given a white stone and a new name. Again, I'm like, this is obviously way older than the Book of Revelation. So like that story is that I do believe that that's part of that. There's going to be this restoration of Eden when we get to heaven. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting that like, if Eden is still able to get there, well, it's visible. Sometimes it's not visible other times. Mm-hmm. Eden, New Jerusalem, they sort of seem like there's some kind of correlation between the two of them. I mean, I don't know if they're exactly the same, but it is interesting. That was God's garden.
Well, I imagine Eden is a place on earth as it was originally. I don't think that's changed necessarily. But then I think New Jerusalem is a heavenly city that perhaps does manifest in and out more so than the earthly realm of a literal garden, shall we say. I think it's both spiritual and physical. It's psychedelic. It's the only way to describe it.
Well, the Garden of Eden is, I think it's described probably in Ezekiel 28 when it's talking about the devil. It's talking about God's holy mountain. Mm-hmm. And it's talking about the garden on the holy mountain. So like when we read in the account of Genesis, you don't get the sense that it's up really high. Mm-hmm. But there's other verses that kind of indicate that it is on top of a mountain. Mm-hmm. So again, like Holy Jerusalem, is it hovering above Eden? Maybe. I mean, that's the whole idea. Maybe that's the whole idea of like the Rupus Nigra and that's where Eden is at the top, and that's where earth and heaven meet.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I wouldn't know. I wasn't there when everything was built, I can only speculate.
Sounds good.
I can only speculate, and it's I'm looking forward to finding out at some point in my in all of this, because that's what we're all looking forward to. You want to talk about a blessed hope? I mean, this is reinvigorating because it's kind of like this. Everyone was making their way to this place, and the time's going to come where it's going to be manifest again, and we'll all know again. And the choice will have to be made again, I suppose, in some way, because it sounds like people are going to go to war with this thing, whatever it is in the north. That seems to be what the plan is in the little season, to convince the earth to go and try and destroy it. I mean,
maybe you think it could be something about like them trying to get to the tree of life.
Maybe like that's the real.
But if it was like
that's the real thing, but they're telling everybody else, they've come to get us. The aliens have manifested from another dimension. Quick, let's get them. Like,
I never considered that could have been what the real reason why you would want to get to the Camp of Saints, because it's kind of like if you're the devil, it's like you really can't win. But you could almost convince somebody that they would try this suicide mission if you were trying to say, well, they have the key to eternal life beyond these gates. So you have to get in, storm the gates, get eternal life.
Well, it would make sense that, the ulterior motive. Like, what do the foot soldiers know about the real mission of the leaders and the generals? They don't, do they? And the people they're going to send to die are just there as to get through the gate so they can come in afterwards and get to what they really need, which is that. Again,
that's why God set a chair with a flaming sword at the gate. Because he did not want them to have access to the tree of life.
Yeah,
that's why Trump wants Greenland.
Well, you have to wonder today, that what is going on there. And I remember when I brought that one up, someone said, "Oh yeah, and then Panama is so close to the north." That was kind of the rebuttal. And I'm like, "Yeah, well, they've got to throw a distraction in there while they're at it." Interesting times. It gives us a new lens to interpret world events with. That's for sure. And like I said, we don't know what's really going on today with the truth of geopolitics, and the movement of power and the wars that we see today, what the true end goal is. But reading these accounts today, which obviously Adam has compiled for us and put the work in here, are incredible. And I really want them to be true. Okay, I'm on board. I want to believe, but I'm gonna hold back with a little bit of skepticism, because I don't want to give our enemy like ammunition to use against us. If a lot of these are easily debunkable or can easily be found to be forgeries or false or something like that, then they're going to use that against us. They're going to say these people are idiots, or these people are using falsified documents as evidence and this type of stuff. And we have to kind of be careful in this time, because if we are talking about the little season and this is Satan's go at it, he's not happy with us. And we're going to have enemies. We're going to have people who are going to do whatever they can to smear us, destroy us, bring us down, make us seem like cult leaders or something, or trying to say, we're heretics spreading false doctrine, jeopardizing people's salvation, or we're going to get infiltrators. We're going to get people coming into the group, trying to make us look bad or acting inappropriate towards other people, to say those little seasoners out there are nuts. There's going to be problems we're going to encounter, and I just don't want to give them another bit of ammunition to use against us. You know what I mean? In some way. So I'm being careful here, but I'll give it to you.
John the Baptist ate no meat, drank no wine. They said he had a demon. Jesus came eating and drinking. They called him a glutton and a drunk. It does not matter what we say. I get what you're saying. But what I want to say, again, this is what I said from the very beginning. It's really weird that there's this many accounts. It's not like we're just taking some random book and just reading out of it that just is pure fiction. It's like, this is a lot of accounts. It's kind of like one truth or one lie versus this many stacked upon each other. It's like, this would have to be almost like Occam's razor. It came from something else, right? Like it came from maybe it came from other texts that they're copying. Occam's razor says that these people didn't independently come up with almost the exact same thing. That's almost the exact same theories we've been having, unless like somebody was literally writing down what we've been saying on our live streams in order to try to backdate all this stuff to mock us later.
Well, most real historians, usually when they're looking for stuff about the past, the more corroborating stories they have that are the same description backs up that this is historical fact. That's called evidence. That's called historical evidence, and why should we take just these stories, which are fantastical by a modern standard, which are mystical and magical by a modern standard? Why should we not take these repeat accounts as the same standards we do for every other historical account? The more accounts we have repeating the same thing, the more likely it's true, right? So how is this any different?
Well, it's different because it's so fantastical that it would be easy to just throw it out. But the funny thing that the people who would be our critics, who would agree with us about a lot of things. They would agree with your book about the Nephilim and clowns. They would agree with our movie about ancient angels. And so what we've done with your book and with my movie, we've taken ancient mythologies, which we would all say, we're not saying this is fact, but it came from a true place.
Mm-hmm.
Why is this any different?
Exactly. No, I agree. So
The way uh, the way that I look at it is that's what Scripture said was going to happen. So when I read like thousands of accounts of all of these exact same things happening, I mean, I believe Scripture is true. They may not all be true, but there's just no feasible way in my mind that they're all lying about the exact same thing from so many different. It's not just Christian cultures. These are across like Viking sagas and like various other tribes around the earth. It's just there's just too many of them that say the exact same thing. And the one last thing I'll say, you can look up on Wikipedia these restricted vaults. They'll tell you all about it on Wikipedia, and they'll show you all the different titles in the sections, and the ones that are highly restricted have to do with the thousand-year reign, glorified saints, and Satan being released. Those are like the three hot topics that they have classified or restricted. And it
just
all happened right around the time that we thought Satan would be getting out, right around 1500.
just as we suspected this entire time. It's scary how much this really does. We keep finding more and more things which really do hyper confirm this whole little season theory as not just a theory. It seems to and again, I've always been, try to remain a little bit back. It's kind of, we could be wrong, but more and more stuff keeps coming up now where it's kind of like, well, somebody has to be right. Something like the truth is somewhere, right? It's not all subjective, and this little season theory is gaining more and more validity by the day. Thanks to researchers like you, Adam, who are out there doing these things behind the scenes and just bringing new revelations to us. I mean, we're just presenters. We're just the guys who you tell about this stuff about, and we go, all right, we'll make a video about it. Let's see what the audience has to say about this.
I can talk for 2 hours about that. Go ahead, just give it to us.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but at the same time, I don't want to take the credit for this, because I think there are people out there doing
for sure.
way better work than I am on this, who don't have the platforms to get these messages out. So, Adam, I'm going to do whatever I can to help people like Adam and anybody else who goes out there and does the work to elevate them up. And we are a community at the end of the day, working hard to figure this out. But we're not a cult. We're a bunch of people with different beliefs, different ideas, but we all fundamentally believe in Jesus and that he told the truth. And we want to work backwards from there. So, Adam, thanks for doing this. I really appreciate you coming on and talking about this. Before we leave, you tell everybody where they can find you and what you do online in your work, and where they can get this document. I have posted links to all 3 documents, the one we've been reading, an extra one with more proof on there, and the source documents. All 3 links are in the video description of this.
You can
down below.
tell 861 in the chat where to find you.
Really?
Follow that man. Yeah, 861.
I don't know if I typed it. I think I typed it correctly. It's most everything I have is on X. That's where I hold spaces, and I do most of the posts on there. You can find if you look in the highlights section, you'll find any documents I've posted, all my research, snippets, screenshots, and various things.
Mm-hmm.
I think I put it in there. It's Bueller Dam, and then it'll be Dam Blue or Dom Blue.
At Bueller Dam Blue is the name, the handle. Yep, right, perfect. And you're in our Telegram group as well. You're in there regularly, aren't you? Under AdB, I believe. And you're obviously sharing stuff on there all the time. Anything you learn and discover, you're on the little season chat in there, just sharing it as well. A valued member of our community. Thanks for doing this, Adam. I really appreciate it.
Hey, I really am thankful that being laid up for so many years and all the research I've had, because I don't really have family, and now that I'm excommunicated, my daughter's at college, I have nothing but time.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I used to kind of see it as a sour point, but I'm so it's a blessing now, because not everybody has that time to do the research, and I have the ability, and I'm laid up, so.
Perfect. Right. Well, to end this show, guys, if you are listening live, I am going over to members only now for an hour. But this has been going on for 2 hours. If you're interested in coming to the members only chat, come and join me. I don't know if these 2 gentlemen want to stick around for that. That's their choice. But I'm going to have to end this show now and move on to the members only chat. So come and join me there if you haven't already, or if you're listening after this and you are a member. that'll be available for you to go and listen to too. This whole thing we've done will be available in audio format only through podcasting, wherever you get your podcasts from, and in video format and podcast format on Spotify as well. So go and check that out there, subscribe on there, like on there, give it a 5-star review, bump that extra backup of all my content, please, because if this all gets taken away from me, at least we can still find some stuff there as well. So there we go. And JT, before we leave, anything you want to quickly say, and then we'll close this out.
Oh, yeah. First, I want to thank Adam. Yeah, that's awesome, dude. I really appreciate you doing that research again, because I think that, like, me and Paul do so much talking. It's hard for us to do as much researching with all the other stuff we got going on. So we really appreciate this community who does help us get to these places, because me and Paul, we have maybe the ability to vocalize it and maybe put some pieces together. But yeah, like, without you guys, we would not be near as far, because somebody had to send me the Gunnar Heinsohn thing. Obviously, this is another brother who's given us this new information. So really appreciate it. Appreciate all you guys. And yes, you should follow, was it Dan Blue on X? Because I've noticed recently that I've been a little more active on X. There's a lot of people talking about the little season on X right now. So if you guys are on there, let's all connect, because the more this community grows, I think that we want to grow in all the spaces. So yeah, please give Dan Blue a follow, and obviously check me out, and make Paul go use his account over there, or at least maybe compel him to use his account, because he's over there too.
It's a cesspool. I do not want to get involved. I don't want to get
it's
dirty.
Not too bad.
It's
not too bad. It's kind of like the whole thing, like where I've been on TikTok, and yes, it is a cesspool, but on my side of the street, it's not so bad.
Okay,
that's where we're going to carve out our little corner on X, and it's going to be fine.
Well, the spaces are awesome.
They are, and
the sick need a physician, Paul.
Well, Adam's on the front line in X. That's his domain. He's the one spreading the word about the little season. And I have seen a lot more bigger channels are now definitely discussing this topic. Some positively, some negatively. And I will just say my conspiratorial side is kicking in. And maybe we're going to start seeing some infiltrators in this community very soon who are going to try and hijack this whole thing. I can see that coming. And try and make us look very silly and attaching to this idea other concepts which might not necessarily need to be attached to this idea. But what do I know? You know, I've only been doing this for 10 years. Who knows? Who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong, but we'll see what comes of it, you know.
Do you mind if I give one last bit of hope that's really changed my faith? Like, my faith is stronger than it's ever been. When it comes to the attacks and everything, I am fully 100% certain that the Father and the Son are behind us, and that Satan's uncontested total deception, like without any sort of resistance, it's over. Like, it's game time now. Like, he's gonna have resistance, and so I think the Father and the Son are behind us for sure. So
well, if those saints are in the north governing the matters of this world, and the kingdom still stands and is still going and never ended, and we are walking in the kingdom and it's within us, then no doubt the influence is coming through whatever it is we're doing, and we're fumbling our way through blind, hopefully doing what the best we can. So again, we'll have to leave it there, guys. Thanks for listening, and as always, God bless.